Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to week 6 of British, American, and Australian Studies. And today we would like to talk about the Australian studies that may focus on the history of Australia and populations and then a part of Australian citizens. So some facts about Australia. So this is fun facts about Australia. Maybe these facts are not familiarized by many people, but let's see what happened. The word kangaroo, for example, as we know, kangaroo is a unique animal from Australia. Well, there was a funny things introduced by Sir Joseph Banks, a botanist from Europe. When they came to Australia, they asked about the name of an animal, and then people who lived there at the very beginning answered kangaroo. Well, kangaroo means I don't understand you. So the people didn't understand. But Sir Joseph claimed that kangaroos, and it seems like kangaroo. This sounds like kangaroo. So he mentions the animal as kangaroo, the name of animal up to now. That's the first everyone. Down under, which is very well known, I think. It is just a colloquialism actually, which is variously construed or referred to Australia and New Zealand. Basically, this term is just because of the locations of those nations. It is in southern hemisphere, so below almost all other countries. So that's why it's called down under. Another names that refer to the residents of Australia, which is Aussie. Aussie is the people, and then the informal reference to the country, so they call it Aus. Well, if some people pronounce Aus like using S sounds, so it sounds like Oz. That's why the country called Oz as well. And then another name of Australia, a lot of people mention Australia very quick, so it sounds like Australia. So Australia, actually, it is Australia. Let's move to the territory of Australia. Well, there are 8 states in Australia, and then Australian Capital Territory, for example, and the capital city is Canberra, 380,000 people. Not many people live there, which is small. This is the capital city of Australia, by the way, but it's a small area. Not many people live there, so it's very quiet. Next big city is New South Wales. So Sydney, that's also I think the biggest city in Australia. So 4.4 million there live there, and Northern Territory Darwin, yeah, just 120,000 people there. In Queensland, so Brisbane is the capital city, 2 million people. South Australia, Adelaide is the city, 1.7 million. And Tasmania, Hobart, that's another, that's not located in Australian continent or Australian land, but it's special land. I mean, another land, a small land, so a small island. Tasmania is, has Hobart as his capital city. 211,000 people live there. Victoria, well, not that big, but it's very, it's very crowded. 4 million people live there. Melbourne is the city. In Western Australia, Perth, you can look at the Western Australia, such a large area, but only with 1.7 million people. So in total, it's about 14 million people, or 14 million 500,000 people live in Australia. Maybe it's quite small, I think. Yeah, that's quite small if you compare with the total population of Java Island, Indonesia. So that's why the government always welcome every people who will come to Australia. So they are very welcome, and then you can be a citizen there. But there are several tests you need to pass, and then it's a lot of tests. So you at the end of the day will be received as the Australian citizen. You can have a try. And then, yeah, I think this is very popular. Aboriginal people as the first inhabitant of Australia, and then they arrived about at least 600,000 years ago. So yeah, they were actually the first inhabitant of Australia, and some people also claim there was an Asian people, even Indonesian people from Makassar. They go to Australia from the sea, and then they have such a quite let's say good relationship with Aboriginal people at the time. And then yeah, there was a group in Australia. There was a particular place in Australia where people speak Makassar language, Bugis. So they speak with the Makassar language there. So there was a furor about it, and then a lot of research show that yeah, Makassar people went to Australia and had a relationship with Aborigines. Um, this is the fact about Aborigines people, and then let's say they live in groups called tribes or clans, and then nomadic. Yeah, they move from one place to another place, especially in the area of jungle, and then they like to stay in forest, and they don't really like to stay in city. They were hunters and gatherers as well. They hunted animals and gathered fruits such as nuts and berries to eat, and they used boomerang as their tools for hunting food. Well, there was a bad story, I mean, sad story of Australia, especially for Aborigines people, when there was a moment called Stolen Generations. A lot of children's or Aboriginal children, were removed from their families, from their families, and then they were brought to the city by white people, and then they were grown up there. However, they didn't get any sufficient nutrition, sufficient food, and then education as well. Sometimes some of them, one of reference said that they even got or experienced sexual abuse over there. Well, that's such a big trauma for Aboriginal people. Why they do it? Because they claim that the country will not improve and cannot be developed country if they Aboriginal people still stay in the island, while Aboriginal people believe that they protect the island. So they are the caretakers of the islands of the Australia. So that's why Australia is getting more well known and then improve and then develop. So they believe that. However, there was such a bad story, or let's say sad story from Australia, which is called Stolen Generations. And that's one version. Another person say that no, they just want to grow up the childrens and give them better educations, better life, and better future. But um, Aboriginal people do not believe that. They don't believe it, and then claim it as one of the tragedy. There was a moment in 26 May 1998 called National Sorry Day. So National Sorry Day is just like a healing, reconciliations, a remembrance or commemorate of mistreatment from countries to indigenous people. So seems like it is reconciliation between indigenous peoples and the settlers of population in Australia. However, that's not a public holiday, by the way. It's just celebrated by a group of people, and some claim that that was not part of the story day. I mean, yeah, the history, the story just has been stolen, and it has been told to every generations, every single generation. So they have such a big trauma, so it cannot be healed, or it cannot be changed with just a national sorry day. But government tried to make Aboriginal people special in every single part of the country, like educations, and then they built the house or residence for Aboriginal people, but they don't want that. Most of them just prefer to stay in the forest and then do not stay at city. But some of Aboriginal people also go to school. I mean, most of them, yes, goes to school and then get better educations. I mean, even in my University of Adelaide, there was one of lecturers who is Aboriginal people and is very expert in his in his expertise. And then a lot of people, a lot of Aboriginal people right now grow up, become an experts in many cases, in many dimensions of disciplines of science in Australia. So actually, it's relatively melting right now. It's splendid. I mean, that's okay. There was no such a big issue, but still, Aboriginal people sometimes they express whatever they want. They do anything they want to do, and then yeah, not many people can stop it. Yes, policemen can stop it, but we can see almost every day there were, yeah, a lot of Aboriginal people hang out or walk on the street in around the city, and then they just cry, and then yeah, sometimes they show their group, and that's another thing, another part of the Aboriginal story in Australia. Well, everyone, if you ask the who found Australian island, well, a lot of story, a lot of versions. I just want to introduce four of them. William Jensons is one of the people from Holland, and they found New Holland, and now is familiar with New Zealand. And Abel Tasman also dropped by in one of the Australian area, and then that's called Tasmania right now. So Abel Tasman found it, and then James Cook, a British, and then 29 April 1770, and they arrived in South Wales, so in New Wales, and then now it's very popular with New South Wales. And then James Cook also were aware they was aware that, oh, Australia is not just part of the state, part of the particular area, but that's a big island, even 26 times, I mean, bigger than Great Britain. So they invited a lot of people from from British to come to Australia. That's the first story. I mean, that's the moment when a lot of people from not only from British, from Europe, come to Australia. And then Matthew Flinders also popularized the terms of Australia, and by writing some books, and then put Australia as the Australian names there. So Australia became, more and more popular. So, well, everyone, hopefully you can get a lot of insight from the story of Australia. And then now let's move on to Kahoot. So I prepared several questions there, so you can answer or choose the best choice, just to to know your understanding about the presentation. Thank you.